Hello and welcome to episode number 58 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam.
I'm Sahil.
And it would appear that Yuki is back from the dead. And a lot of people, actually. It's final season is wrapping up in Ann Arbor, which I know both of us are hoping means a lot of us will get more active in the league.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely looking forward to it. I know my finals are over too, although I still feel like I make just as many trades during finals as I do during the other times of the year because I can't seem to turn this league off. So, but I'm excited. I know a lot of us were talking trades with Yuki in both the baseball and hockey leagues. I know there's a couple others too, like Jake's been more active as evident by both of the trades that have happened this week, which we'll get into. And I know a few other people as well. So maybe we'll have another winter meetings over break. I know we had one earlier in the month, but maybe we'll have a second one that'll turn into another game night. But I'm looking forward to it. The more trades, the better.
Yeah, no, we'll see. We're all getting ready for break. We're getting ready to simply have a wonderful Christmas time.
That we are. That we are. Is it a wonderful Christmas time or a wonderful Christmas Tim?
Oh, it's a wonderful Christmas Tim with our temporary secretary.
Yes, indeed, with our temporary secretary.
And these are so we were in New York this past weekend. Sahil and I saw each other for the first time in over 2 years. It was very fun. We me, Sahil, Andrew, Greg, and Alex all hung out, went to an Islanders game. I listened to some of the worst of Paul McCartney's catalog and just had a great time, ate some good food. Yeah,
it was a fun time.
A wonderful Christmas time.
It was a wonderful Christmas, Tim. And we did do a Gallardo draft, which we'll also get into the actual Gallardo draft coming up. But we did a 40-round Gallardo draft just solely off the top of our heads with 15 seconds a pick. And the results were interesting. I was pretty impressed with some of our abilities to fill out teams.
Yeah, I got drafted.
Yeah, Cam did get drafted. For a new sport, which I didn't even know existed, basketball.
Yeah, no, it was a bit of a mad dash, but I played basketball apparently. Yeah, really. Let's talk about the real Gallardo draft because that is coming back. I believe on Friday. When Eric said.
Yeah, I think we're going to start it. Yeah, I think roughly 17 to 18, kind of sometime around there. He was waiting for the end of the Michigan finals to do that. I think as everybody here knows, we have 4 keepers this year. I think the keeper decisions so far have been really interesting. I've yet to submit mine. Maybe that's on purpose, maybe not. But I'm really excited to do this again. I thought this was a lot of fun last year. I think none of us really knew how to strategize for this last year. I thought we had general ideas, but I think I'm going to come at this with a lot different approach next year. And I'm really excited to see it all play out. What about you?
Yeah, so I like the strategy of having your keepers stay in the round from the original draft. So that adds a layer of strategy. Whereas, do you want to pick an all right player who you got in the 50th round, or do you want to pick a great player you got in the second? Who's to say? I'm not sure I like people keeping someone from the first couple of rounds because you'll be able to get, unless it's Anthony keeping McDavid, which he has not made a decision on because that's he'd go number one if he was on the board. But really, I, on the most part, think that you kind of want to, use your picks on someone who you're getting getting much better value for, and you'll get someone great in the first round anyway. Why waste the pick?
Yeah, exactly. I'm on the same boat as you. I mean, I think you really have to look at where they're being drafted, or where they should be drafted versus where you could keep them. And if you feel like there's a big enough value difference, that definitely makes it worth it. And I think at the top of the rounds, there's just such a small value difference, I don't think there's as much of a value difference between somebody going into 50th or somebody who won into 50th that you're getting the first versus the 40th in the first. But I feel like there might be a bigger difference between somebody you took into fifth but would have to get into first this year versus somebody you took into second and would have to get into first this year. So I think it's kind of weighing that. It's not just about selecting the 4 best players that you drafted last year. So I think it does add a bit of complication, and I'm really excited. And hopefully we'll veto the hell out of Ruthvik like we did last year, because that was a lot of fun.
That's right. I forgot about that. Speaking of which.
No, you did it wrong. There you go. You have to tag him. He has to know.
He does. He'll find out.
There you go. We're already getting a veto trade going.
We are. Yes, Sully responded with the veto. I'm not, and I feel okay saying this because he's not going to listen. I'm not sure I love his keepers, but that's okay. You never know how a player is going to be next year. The veto train is continuing with Anthony now.
I'm glad you mentioned that about Sully's team, because I was also kind of like on his keepers. I think he kept somebody in the first round, did I remember correctly, or he kept McKinnon.
Which, yes, he's picking 9th. He probably could have gotten McKinnon at 9.
Yeah, and then he probably could have kept somebody else at a better value. I think you're probably right about that. I kind of like Trey Turner in the 3rd. I don't know if it's a huge value proposition, but like I think Trey Turner, I think I told you this earlier, has an argument to be the number 1 overall pick in redraft or fantasy baseball leagues this year. So I think getting him into 3rd is a good value. And
meanwhile, Sully got Kevin Gausman in the 47th, and he's not keeping him.
Yeah, I would have rather kept Gausman in the 47th than keeping McKinnon.
Bryant in the 34th.
Who in the 34th?
Chris Bryant.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one too. I could see him being turned off a little bit from keeping both of them just because he had already decided to keep Turner and Semien, and maybe he didn't want to keep
3 baseball, I guess.
1 football, but like, see, I wouldn't mind it if I'm getting the right value. It's just like, I don't want to keep 1 player in each sport just for the sake of doing it, because you could always draft to replace them. But I think there's only going to be 48 players taken out of the player pool.
Yes, 48.
So that's essentially like 4 rounds worth of picks that we're taking out of the player pool. And not all of those are necessarily guys who would have gone in the first 4 rounds. It just might be guys who are really good values that you might have, say, taken in like the 6th, 8th, 10th, whatever round.
Yeah, I agree. You really gotta weigh how much value you're getting and how, and I guess replace wins over replacement, wins above replacement. What would the replacement player you'd get in that round be if you were picking it all over? If it's the 78th round, you're going to be getting guys like
Robbie
like
Ray.
Jonathan Scope. Well, not Robbie Ray. That was a great pick, and he should be keeping him. Because if he were to not keep Robbie Ray goes in like the 5th round, and he gets someone like Jonathan Scope next time, and that's not valuable. I mean, actually, there were a couple of decent 78th rounders. Mackenzie Weegar, Andrew Kopp is a pretty solid pick by Anthony. Anthony made some good picks. But anyway, and the fact that this current season has barely just begun, so it's going to be kind of fun to kind of watch it unfold while the current season's happening. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, I gotta
Excited.
say too, I wonder if it does affect people's decisions because, like, what happens if somebody gets hurt, and
That's
we've already
true.
started to draft. I'm definitely thinking about that in football. I drafted Jonathan Taylor in the 6th round last year, and he's done really well. But I also drafted Cam Akers in the 7th, and he never played a
Hmm.
snap this year because he got hurt. Like, what happens if I decide to keep Jonathan Taylor and he tears his ACL in between now and the end of the season? Like, uh, it's tricky. But I have confidence in all of us that we will uh figure it out one way or another, and I'm looking forward to this draft.
Hmm. Me too. That's going to be starting by the end of this week, early next week. Um, and yeah, what else? What else do we have on tap for today?
Yeah, so you um before we dive into these trades here, I feel like we're doing this in the opposite order today, but that's quite fine. You made a big announcement in the chat yesterday, and I thought this was really cool. And I'm gonna sit back and let you explain this. But looks like we have a new feature to the league history.
We do. It's called the Dynasty Belt. And basically, this was inspired by a similar thing. Well, basically, it's inspired by a thing that I've seen in college football, but it comes from boxing or other sports such as that, where basically there's a belt, and to win the belt, you have to beat the person who currently holds the belt, and that makes you the champion of the world or whatever boxing does. Um, People do that kind of non-seriously in college football, whereas if you beat the team that currently has the belt, then you take it from them. I mean, that they have that dating back to the very first ever Rutgers versus Princeton game in 1869, to track who has beaten the winner of that game each successive time. And I believe it's currently Ole Miss who has it right now, which is kind of weird. Uh,
Seriously,
but
I did not know that move
yeah,
existed. That's cool. I need to check that out.
yeah. So that's kind of where this was inspired by, and I decided to do it for our league. And basically, I gave the belt the origins in the 2018 finals when Eric won the title, saying that he got in our, I guess, uh, in this alternate universe, Eric won the M-SABR belt by winning the finals. And then whoever defeats him wins the belt. Whoever defeats that person takes the belt from them, and so on. At the end of the 2019 season, the belt was held by Eric again when he won the finals. At the end of the 2020 season, Eric didn't make the playoffs, and there were no regular season head-to-head matchups, so he just held the belt again. And throughout this season, he won it again in the middle of the season, or actually in the playoffs. So he has held it at the end of every season, but it has not just been all Eric. He is actually only the second. He's second in terms of number of weeks holding the belt behind you. You've held it for 14 matchups. Eric's held for 9, and third place is actually Yuki's team, which has held it for 8 matchups, including 6 in a row in the middle of 2019. EBO has held it for 5 weeks. I held it. I was actually the third team to hold it, winning it in 2019 despite not having a great team that year. I held it for a week then, and then later this year I held it for 3 weeks before losing it in the semis, because that matchup, because we needed another reason to add importance to that matchup with me versus Eric. So this is all in the spreadsheet. 10 teams have held the belt, including Andrew held it this year. Daniel and Greg held it this year. They finished last. Yuki finished in second to last. He held the belt this year. But Anthony and Clayton and Jake, those 2 teams have never held the Dynasty belt, which is kind of surprising because they both, Anthony has made the playoffs a couple times. Clayton and Jake have not made the playoffs, but that team has been close. And it's just kind of a lot of fun. Yuki's taken it from you twice. And I'd like to see this kind of go linearly throughout the course of the league and see how, especially see next year, it kind of change hands in real time. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I didn't even think when you did this that 2020 wasn't really taken into account. So it's really only 2 seasons worth that's been taken into account, plus I guess the 2018 finals.
Right. If had someone who made the 2020 playoffs held it at the end of 2019, I would have included it through the 2020 playoffs. But since Eric held it at the time, it didn't end up changing hands.
Right. No, that makes sense. I do think it's funny that 2 of the 3 times I've given it up, it's been because of losses to Yuki. Um, and I guess the other time was a loss to Eric in the 2019 finals. And I'm proud to say that I have held it more weeks than anybody else at 14. There's actually a pretty big gap between me and Eric, 14-9 there, although Eric will be holding it to start the season. I think you're right. It'll be fun to track this in real time.
What if
And
we had a loser's belt as well?
oh,
I don't know how we would. I don't know who would hold the belt to start with, I guess, but
who did I think EVO would, if you're saying that EVO lost at finals to Eric the first year, so they hold the loser's belt, and I guess everybody that loses to the successive team just
yeah, they get the
yeah.
loser's belt.
I'd be curious to see. Also, I know like you said yesterday that like it really, or you told me that like it would probably end with the same team no matter what, who we had started, who had the belt to start out with. But I don't think that's the case, because like one of the non-playoff teams could have held it going into the playoffs this year, and then it just would have ended with them. So it's also kind of crazy how just who the belt starts out with has such a different effect on how the belt kind of travels.
That's true, but I think eventually, with I guess teams winning multiple weeks in a row, you winning 13, going 13-0 to start the year, it would have gotten to you at some point in the first half of the year, no matter what.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
you would have lost to Yuki in week 17 this year, or in week 15 this year, no matter what. So it kind of always would have gone on this path.
Yeah, that's true. I guess, yeah, because I did get it from Andrew in week 10 and then held it for 5 weeks afterwards, which reflected all of my winning. Do ties count against it, or is it tie just
So it hasn't come up yet, but I think my ruling is that it stays with the current owner if there's a
that
tie.
makes sense. That makes sense. I think we should get like a little like picture of one of those wrestling belts and have somebody like Photoshop the M-SABR logo into the center of it. I think that would be fun.
I love it.
No, I'm excited for this. I think this is a great addition to the spreadsheet. I know I'll be tracking it closely next year. I think it gives me more motivation to beat Eric now that he not only won the league, but he owns the Dynasty Belt. And kind of one other interesting thing too, because of how 2020 played out. Eric technically owned a belt for like 18 months with only like one game being played in between the 2019 finals and 2021 week 2. Which is kind of amusing. So he has held it by far for the longest period of time, but not for the longest period of games.
That's true. I'm only tracking number of games that you've had it, but that's still that's true. He certainly has held it for a long time, especially since he's held it for every offseason so far.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there were a couple trades. Normally we talk about these first. We'll talk about them now, and we'll talk about them a little briefly because we are going to have Jake on later in this episode to talk about them more at length and talk about his offseason in general. But Sahil, why don't you talk about the first trade that Jake made?
Yeah, this one was. I feel like Jake is like the king of making trades that I look at, and the first time I feel like maybe this goes one way, and then I look at the trade a second time and I'm like, damn, I don't know. It just like I don't know what to think about it. So Deep Sea Devers traded Tristan Casas, Taylor Rogers, and its 2023 third round pick to go with the flow for Gleyber Torres, Edwin Diaz, and DL Hall, with the third round pick going to me as part of an earlier trade condition that Jake and Clayton needed to satisfy. Did you want to analyze this first, or do you want me to dive in?
I'll talk about it. I think this is a solid deal for Jake. I think Tristan Casas is a pretty good prospect, although I get Tristan Casas, Bobby Dahlbeck, and the third guy, Michael Chavis. I get the three of them confused. They're the same person in my mind. They're all Red Sox first base prospects that came up kind of one after the other.
Casas hasn't come up yet.
Well, I guess Casas hasn't come up yet, and he's the best of the three, especially since Chavis is kind of flamed out. Or is it Chavis or Dahlbeck that's kind of flamed out and ended up on the Pirates?
Chavis flamed out, and he's now in Pittsburgh. Dahlbeck showed some flashes last year. Let's see how he ended up finishing up. But I think he showed some promise at least. I think his problem a little more was he didn't really have playing time. So he had 25 homers and 78 ribbies and 453 plate appearances. That part was good. He had a 298 OBP and a 34.4% K rate. So that was the bad.
That's not good.
And he did this as age 26 seasons. This was his first kind of full season in a major. So he's always kind of had high strikeout rates in the majors. I don't know if this is necessarily sustainable. He played 2 games of shortstop this year.
Really?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to believe, but he did.
But we're not talking about Michael Chavis. We are talking about what's his name?
That was
Tristan
Bobby
Casas.
Dahlbeck.
That was Bobby Dahlbeck.
Bobby Dahlbeck is who I was referring to. The Indus trade is Tristan Casas, and Michael Chavis is now in the Pirates.
Okay. So Tristan Casas was traded. He's a solid prospect. I think Gleyber Torres, though, is an interesting buy low candidate. He's certainly shown he can be a productive hitter. A lot of outlets are really low on him. They're not sure where he's going to play. They're not sure he can continue to hit. But I think he can certainly bounce back. I think Edwin Diaz is a solid closer. He'll be someone good for Ruthvik to have. And I think it's good that Ruthvik's acquiring young hitters with high ceilings. Torres actually had a much higher than normal BABIP this year, despite the lackluster stats. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, it was an interesting batting line. I don't think there was a lot that happened this year that I wasn't really expecting from him.
Well, he's 25 years old. It's kind of maybe his last chance, but he's a good buy low guy, is my point. And Ruthvik, this team maybe kind of on the bubble this year. He could use a breakout from him. Jake's team is also on the bubble, I guess. But basically, that's kind of what I think about the trade. Ruthvik gave up a interesting prospect for a buy low guy and a solid reliever.
Yeah,
and a buy low prospect.
Yeah, I disagree with your characterization of some of this. So I do agree that Gleyber Torres is a decent buy low candidate. I don't know if he paid a buy low price though. Ruthvik did. I mean, Casas is a very good prospect. I mean, he's bounced around in this league a couple times now. I know I owned him at first, and Eric and Jake, but he's still been a pretty highly ranked prospect this entire time. Fangraphs had him rated 17th going into the year, 55 FV. He had a very solid season in Double-A, and even got called up to Triple-A and did well. It was only 21. I mean, I know the first base is pretty deep, but there's no reason for me to think that he can't be a really solid bat. Gleyber, when you look at the numbers, it'd be one thing if Ruthvik had acquired him after last year. We're like, hey, he was really good in 18 and 19. He had a little bit of a down year in 20, but he cut the K rate and the walk rate went up. There's reason to believe maybe he bounces back. I mean, he just didn't. The K rate went back up, the walk rate went back down, the BABIP was up. He only did 331 OBP. He only had 9 home runs and 516 plate appearances, which is not going to cut it. And weirdly, he had 14 stolen bases, which is weird because like he only had 12 combined in his career before that. So maybe the speed stays, it's a little more interesting. But like he hit 38 homers and 604 plate appearances in 19, and he's had 12 home runs in 676 plate appearances since then. Like, what happened? Like, I just, it kind of baffles me. And if he can't bounce back with the power, then I mean, I don't think he has all that much value. Now, maybe moving back over to second base next year is going to help. And I do think, regardless, he is an upgrade over JP Crawford, but I don't know if that makes it. I don't know if giving up a top 20 prospect to get Gleyber constitutes a buy low. I mean, unless Ruthik is really convinced that Gleyber is going to be like perfectly fine, and if he does, then this is probably a decent value. But I'm just not totally sold. I think Edwin Diaz is better than Taylor Rogers, but I don't know if that necessarily makes up for the value. Like I think, Edwin Diaz is a very solid closer, but me, I don't feel like paying a premium in the reliever market in the offseason is necessarily the best idea. And as an Orioles fan, I've really soured on DL Hall because he just can't control the ball. I think he's a bullpen piece at this point. He had a 602 walk per 9 in high A in 19, and that number got a little better this year with the 455 in double A, but like he was also only healthy enough to pitch 31 and 2/3 innings. So yeah, I think I might say that Jake wins this trade, but it really hinges on Gleyber bouncing back, like whether or not that happens.
Yeah, no, a lot of this trade does hinge on Gleyber, and I guess there's some that hinges on Casas as well. But yeah, this really is a big trade for Gleyber. Is this his last shot, or is this his breakout?
Yeah, I have to say too, Gleyber has been involved in some really interesting trades in league history now. So it's amazing how much he's bounced around for a guy who came up at age 21. It looked like he was going to be an absolute stud.
That's true. Yeah, he bounced around a couple times even when we thought he was a stud.
Yeah, because what you drafted him initially, right? And then you
I
traded
did.
him to me. I traded him to Eric later that offseason for like a boatload of players, prospects, all that. And then Eric traded him and Clevenger to Jake for Wander.
Yeah, he moved a lot that one offseason.
Yeah, he really did. Interesting to see, but like you said, he's only 25. It's actually his birthday yesterday.
Hey, happy birthday to Gleyber.
Yeah. And we'll see if he bounces back. It'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
He is one game short of second base eligibility next year, so I guess he'll only be short eligible to start this season, but I'm sure he'll get second base eligibility pretty quickly.
I'm sure he will.
Yeah, but anything else in this trade, or do we want to move on to the other trade?
Let's move on to the other one, and you were involved in this one, so why don't you talk about it first?
Yeah, Giovanni is a Wonderland has agreed to trade Raisel Iglesias and Kobe Mayo to Poet the Flow for Mick Abel, Cam's 2021 first-round pick, which is 9th overall, and Eric's 2023 second-round pick, which goes to Connor to fulfill the condition of an earlier trade. My goal actually was not to trade Raisel. My goal was to move another reliever this offseason. I thought Raisel could kind of anchor my bullpen after a really good season he had with the Angels last year, but I thought that this was too good of an offer to turn down. I like trading away relievers in the offseason because I just feel like that they're really replaceable. And as good of a season as Raisel Iglesias had last year, I had a lot of success last year picking up bullpen pieces, whether it was Blake Trinan, Jonathan Loaisaga, I Garrett Whitlock for a little bit, Lou Trevino for most of the year was very solid. So while losing Raisel Iglesias is definitely a blow for my bullpen, I still think I have a lot of good arms, and I think he's replaceable. Kobe Mayo is somebody I really like. He's really come onto the scene and he's been rising up prospect list. And him and Abel have been ranked, interestingly, in basically every dynasty prospect list I've seen, within like 2 or 3 spots of each other. Mayo's a high school hitter. Abel's a high school pitcher. Maybe it would be better to trust a high school hitter, but Abel has gotten a lot of hype as well. I was listening to a podcast today to discuss the top 25 projected prospects in 2024, and both of them cracked those lists. I think I was a little skeptical of Mayo in the sense that he was a bit of a pop-up prospect, while Abel has just kind of always consistently been a top, different prospect rankings and has been on the radar. So I feel pretty good about getting Nick Abel. The walk rate was a little higher this year than I would have liked to have seen, but everything else he did I thought looked really solid. And I think he was top of the rotation upside. I really like getting the 9th overall pick. I've mentioned a couple times that I think that this draft kind of has a top tier of like 6 or 7, but I do think there's a couple quality pieces after that I'd love to have on my roster. And I've made it an emphasis to rebuild my farm system this year. And I think, getting Abel and a 9th overall pick is really going to help do that. Although I might end up regret giving up Mayo. So I feel pretty good about this one. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting trade for you. The fact that you've traded for another first round pick. I do like that for you. I guess you get out of that 1 second that you get to send to Connor. Although value wise, I'm not really sure if you win this deal. I think Mick Abel, he's a higher rated prospect, sure, but he's a pitching prospect. He's a high school pitcher. I don't know how much I trust him. Raisel Iglesias. Yeah, I know you were saying you want to, you don't like trading for relievers in the offseason, so you cut down on one, but really that leaves you a little more thin there at reliever. It's kind of hard to, and then you're kind of saying that you're not going to trade for another reliever in the offseason, so you're going to be a little thin at reliever going into opening day, and I'm wondering how that's going to look for your team.
I think that injuries are going to pop up on my team inevitably, and I think that that's going to give me some extra roster spots to roster relievers. Like I only rostered 4 relievers through most of last offseason. I've picked up guys like Liam Hendricks, Lou Trevino, Giovanni Gallegos, Blake Trinan, Jonathan Loaisaga, Garrett Whitlock, like countless others off of free agency, and have been able to kind of, put together a solid bullpen. So I'm not too concerned about replacing Raisel. He is a big loss, but if you're telling me I'd be able to acquire another first round pick and just have to give up a closer, like to me, that feels like a no brainer. I think the criticism of Mick Abel is very valid though. That's definitely a concern for me, but to have one, pitching prospect, it's kind of like you with Grayson Rodriguez, right? He was kind of the one pitching prospect you invested in, and you're like, kind of kept him and we're committed to seeing it out with him. I kind of feel like that might end up being me with Mick Abel. I don't like keeping pitching prospects like you, but I think he definitely has frontline potential, and at some point, I can't just have a farm system with 20 hitters. You need a pitcher or 2 in there, I feel like, even if you're not going to invest heavily in it, because there is no such thing as a pitching prospect.
Yeah, that's true. There's no such thing as a pitching prospect, but I guess you do want to have a couple. Kobe Mayo, I know he's risen up some boards, but he was also very recently a free agent. I'll never forget you calling him Kobe Mayonnaise in the prospect Slack, and no one knew what that meant.
Now, I cut him too and then added him back eventually. It was kind of weird. I feel like the hype is coming on like now. The hype was not there in like August and September as much. kind of reminds me of Pomaris a little bit when I traded him away. And that's the flip side of all this too. These pop-up prospects, some of them are like Gabriel Moreno. I traded him away earlier this season, and now I'm really regretting it. And some of them end up being like Steven Gonzalez. Like, remember when I traded him for Michael Brantley and Eric was really high on him, or Robert Poisson. You know, I was concerned about trading Poisson last offseason. He just absolutely tanked. Like, you just don't know.
Yeah, you really don't know. That's for sure. And especially with prospects, it's just a crapshoot.
No, exactly. And, you know, at the end of the day, like, I paid a lot less to get Iglesias. Like, I gave up Brandon Nimmo to go get Iglesias. I'm confident that if I really need to go out and trade for a guy like that too, I could go and get him. You know, in 2020, I traded a 3rd-round pick and some prospect whose value has tanked since, like, Sahil or Beaner or something, to get Alex Colomé. He was fantastic that year. It's just, you know, it's hard to replace top prospects. It's easier to replace relievers.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. But we'll see. There's a little off brand for me. These aren't the trades I usually make. I feel like where I'm acquiring a lot more prospects. So I feel like I'm kind of navigating uncharted waters here. I feel like this is more of the types of trades that you or some of the other prospect focused teams are accustomed to making. So we'll see.
We shall see. Yeah, that kind of feels maybe like it's tough because getting rid of the reliever is certainly a you thing. However that may work out, but yeah, maybe this kind of feels like something Eric would do. I don't know. He's owned McAble, hasn't he?
Yeah, Eric drafted McAble and then traded him in that Lance Lynn, Max Scherzer, Kyle Lewis, Luke Voigt deal.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, if that's all we have, then we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with Jake Levine to talk about his offseason and the 2 trades he just made. Stick around.
Yep.
She is a builder, different from the rest. Diamonds on her finger and she always looks her best. She is a gangster with 100-mile stare. When she walks, her feet don't touch a floor. She is a builder. She plays the lightning.
All right, we are joined now by Jake Levine, co-owner of Bow with the Flow. How are you doing today, Jake?
Doing well. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
We wanted to start by talking about how your season ended. Last time you were on was to discuss the 3-way tie at the end of the year. You were the one on the short end of the stick, just missing out on the playoffs. Your lottery pick ended up being 3rd, but it was owned by me. So how do you feel about the end of your season last year, and thoughts about what that means for your team going forward?
Yeah, I felt pretty good about it. I mean, my team started pretty bad. I forget exactly what it was. I think I was like 2-5 or something, maybe even worse. And then I really turned it around over the season, obviously tying for that last playoff spot. Didn't get it. I mean, I had 1 week where I lost ERA by like 0.01. And on that Sunday, my pitchers allowed like 20 earned runs or something crazy, or like a 20 ERA. So I was very close to making the playoffs. But yeah, I feel good about the trajectory of my team, the ability that they were able to turn it around mid-season, because they weren't as bad as they were playing at the beginning. So I feel good going into next year. Hopefully I can get that playoff spot.
No, definitely. I think the one thing that impressed me the most was I know you made a big trade to sell Lance Lynn, and I'm forgetting who the second starter was off the top of my head. Maybe it was Greinke, but
yeah, I think it was Greinke.
Yeah, Lynn and Greinke. And I mean, Lance Lynn was a workhorse, and I know Greinke wasn't as good, but Greinke still provided some consistent innings. But despite trading them away, like, he actually did better after that. And I know you got a couple solid younger pieces back in Kyle Lewis and Luke Voigt, but both of them were pretty banged up for most of the year, so they didn't contribute as much. So definitely impressive to me to see the turnaround for you the second half of the season.
Yeah, I was very heavy on pitching, and my pitchers were on the older side, so I figured I might as well trade some of them away. I did make a trade to get Sandy Alcantara, which was a steal then. It's looking like even more of a steal now. So I feel good about my pitching. I also made that trade to get rid of Kyle Gibson. I know DL Hall got hurt, eventually traded him to you, I believe. But yeah, I feel like pitching is just generally more available than hitting. So I was fine getting rid of some pitchers to, get some question marks in Voigt and Lewis, but guys with high upside. Also Mick Abel, who I also traded to you. But just, churning out those pitchers for younger, hitters or prospects. That was my strategy going into that.
Definitely always good to get younger. I know that's something that's really hard to balance in dynasty leagues. The ability to want to compete, but also getting younger. So I definitely think you did a great job of identifying some of the pieces that you could move at the peak of their value, who are maybe a little older, and then kind of accumulating some younger assets. And I think I speak for Cam as well. I am very jealous of Sandy Alcantara. That trade came out of nowhere, and I'm pretty sure, Cam, I could be wrong, but was that the trade that was the most lopsided in-season trade when we did the award?
Oh yeah, I'm sure it was. It was. Yeah. I mean, what else would have beaten it?
Yeah, man. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah. I forget exactly who it was. It might have been Greg, I want to say. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it was Daniel and Greg. It was Ronnie Mauricio was one of the pieces involved.
Yeah, they were very, very high on Mauricio. And then Flexen was pitching great at the time. But he was more of a throw, and it was really a move for Mauricio. Yeah. And yeah, obviously Mauricio hasn't been great since then. High upside prospect, but also like pretty low floor. So I was definitely fine getting rid of him to get a solid young starting pitcher.
Yeah, he reminds me of Javi Baez, and I think Cam knows how much I dislike Javi Baez as a fantasy asset. So,
and I finally moved on from him this offseason. He definitely gained back a lot of his value over this past year because he had a miserable 2020. So I was happy to get pretty much Rodon for him, another pitcher who really he's only had one good year the last year, but if he can continue that success, and he could be very helpful for my team.
Yeah, I thought Jordan Walker is one of the best parts of that trade as well. I think he's risen up. I love Jordan Walker. I know both Cam and I have caught him over the past year. I think we both greatly regret that, but no, that was definitely one of the more interesting trades that went down. It's I know you kind of had a quiet November on the trade front. You didn't really make any trades before the cut down deadline, but you have come alive in December. I think 5 of the last 7 trades have involved you, which is awesome, including 2 with me and 2 with EBO, 1 with Ruthvik. I know that Cam and I kind of discussed the first 2 trades that you made, and then you and I made a trade literally 5 minutes after we Cam and I recorded our segment. So we'll dive into those. How do we want to do this? Do we want to go over all 5 of the trades, or just the 3 trades that went down this week?
Yeah, I'm fine going over all of them, or whichever ones you guys want to hit on. Yeah, definitely been busy recently with the trading.
Well, we did just kind of talk about the Baez trade, so we can maybe, I guess, skip that one and go over the other 4.
Yeah, that works. Over the other, right, there's the Days Company. So yeah, we kind of went over the Rodon for Baez trade already. So how about we go through the other ones? The other trade you made with EVO was EVO sent you Alex Kirilloff and Matt Barnes. for Zach Gallen and Anthony DeSclafani. Curious what your thought process was behind this trade.
Yeah, this one, I mean, I definitely don't feel like I'm 100% going to win this trade because Zach Allen's a young starting pitcher with a decently high upside, a pretty high floor. So I don't love giving him up, but I do like Alex Kirilloff a lot. He had the highest difference between ex-WOBA and WOBA last year when I was looking on Baseball Savant. So that really stood out to me. Very high prospect pedigree, and he had the injuries. So I really think that he has a potential to break out this next year and become a top 50 hitter for fantasy. And then the other part of the trade, I was just very heavy on starting pitchers. I think I had 12 or 13 starters on my team, so I was fine getting rid of DeSclafani, kind of sell high a bit on him. It was more him and Gallen for Kirilloff, and then Barnes was a throw-in. But I know I picked up Garrett Whitlock after that. Sahil, you were asking me about him, but I wanted to pick him up for a while. I think either Whitlock or Barnes is going to be the Red Sox closer. So one of them could be a top 15 fantasy reliever. I'm not sure which one yet, but hopefully I'll be able to tell, within the first month of the season, and that will open up a roster spot.
No, I'm sure you will be able to. I definitely think the Red Sox closing job is going to be one of the more valuable ones for fantasy. No, I think it's a good analysis. I mean, I think there is some risk with Gallen, and I think there's just a wide range of opinions on Kirilloff right now. I think the trade really hinges on him. If he breaks out, I think you're really going to like this. But I'm not going to speak too much about that. Cam and I already covered that trade. Anything else you'd like to say about that trade, Cam, before we move on to the next one?
No, I think if you think that Kirilloff is going to break out in some of the underlying numbers, particularly the ex-WOBA seem to think he might, then it'd be a great deal for you. But let's move on to your next trade. Is this the Gleyber trade?
Yeah, this one, man. Cam and I were in a restaurant in New York when this broke, and I don't think either of us really were able to fully process it. I felt like I kind of went back and forth, at least trying to figure out who won. I still have a difficult time, but Ruthvik agreed to trade Tristan Casas, Taylor Rogers, and his 2023 third to you for Gleyber Torres, Edwin Diaz, and DL Hall. What was the thought process behind that?
Yeah, I just really wanted to get Tristan Casas. I've heard a lot about him. Obviously, I'm a Red Sox fan, and just seeing what he's done in the minors, the walk numbers and strikeout numbers, the plate discipline is fantastic. And then obviously he's a ton of power, really has a Freddie Freeman type upside, and a pretty high floor too. And so I really just wanted to go out and get him. Gleyber was the main part of the deal. It was tough moving on from him because I still think he's undervalued right now. And he could, rebound, maybe not to his 2019 numbers, but somewhere in the 2018, 2019 number range. Edwin Diaz, obviously a great reliever, but wrong side of 30. Thought it would be a good sell high-ish on him. And then DL Hall, he's just had a lot of injury problems, so I was fine getting rid of him. Also, Taylor Rogers, a nice throw in there. But yeah, Tristan Casas, really, I wanted him. I think he'll be up next year for the Red Sox, and he could be a fantasy stud almost immediately.
I agree. I really like Casas too. I think this trade really hinges on how Gleyber performs. If Gleyber bounces back, I think that this is gonna, really look good for Ruthvik. But if Gleyber doesn't bounce back, I think you're gonna clearly win. And it really depends how Gleyber and Casas performs. I don't think the other pieces are important, but I don't think they're gonna determine whether or not it was a good trade. Any more thoughts, Cam, before we move on to the next deal? I know we just talked about this trade.
Yeah. Basically, I think, it really does, like you said, come down to can Gleyber bounce back or not? He is still super young. I want to believe in him as the person who drafted Gleyber and had him for the first couple of years. And I was maybe in the previous segment a little lower on Tristan Casas than maybe I should have been. But either way, I think this really depends on which version of Glaber Ruthvik gets.
Yeah, and to be clear, or yeah, like just for purposes of kind of getting Ruthvik's perspective, I did talk to him about it, and he seems pretty convinced that Glaber is going to bounce back, and he doesn't really have any issues with the down 2020 or 2021. So I think he's kind of assuming that that's going to happen, and if that's the case, I see why he made this deal. But it's not like Glaber had one down year. This is now 2 down years for Glaber, so I think there is a little reason for skepticism. But let's move on to the next deal here. Actually, these next 2 deals are with me. Cam and I covered this trade pretty extensively in the last segment. I think we disagreed slightly about it, but I traded to you Raisel Iglesias and Kobe Mayo and got back Mick Abel, Cam's 2021 first, which was 9th overall, and Eric's 2023 second, which went straight to Connor to fulfill the conditions of another trade I made with him. What was your thought process behind making this trade, Jake?
Yeah, so I really like Kobe Mayo. I've heard a lot of good things about him. Pretty much a sky high upside. Mick Abel, he had a tough year last year. He still has a very high upside coming. He was a high school pitcher, recently drafted. So he has plenty of time to turn it around. But I kind of want to move on from him and get a hitter with a bit of a higher upside. Pitchers are usually riskier. But Abel was higher in pretty much most rankings, so I was able to get some value there. And then Raisel Iglesias came into the picture. I need relievers, especially after moving Edwin Diaz, and Iglesias is arguably better than Diaz. Probably going to be a top 5 reliever this year and for a few more years. So I was fine moving my first round pick this year to get him. When I was looking at the FYPD this year, I had the 9 pick, and I was trying to move up into that top 7. In my eyes, there's a pretty clear top 7 of Mayer, House, Lawler, Suzuki, Watson, Henry Davis, and I think I'm missing one more. But after that top 7, I really thought there was a drop off, and I thought that the first round value wasn't there at 9. And so to get that top reliever, I was very happy with it. I thought Iglesias is definitely worth more than whatever prospect I would get there. And then the second round pick from Eric, I had 3 second round picks in 2023. His I thought was going to be the latest of them, so I was fine moving that as well.
Yeah, as an Orioles fan, I really like Kobe Mayo and his upside as well. I mean, I do think that Mick Abel had a bit of a high walk rate this year, but I also think there's a lot of positives to take away from his performance this year. So that kind of, for me, kind of canceled that out. Although I know that, pitcher prospects are inherently a bit riskier. I traded Iglesias just for a lot of the reasons you traded Diaz, just like, he's on the other side of 30. I thought he had a career year. I really think I can piece together a bullpen pretty easily. And I do agree with you that there is a clear top 7, and I do think there's a little bit of value kind of later in the first round as well. So I think this is kind of a win-win deal for both of us. I really wanted to improve my farm, and I think I got a couple pieces to do that. And I think, Iglesias is the perfect replacement for you for Edwin Diaz. And like you said, I mean, I also think he's a little better than Diaz, but I don't know. Any more thoughts about this, Cam? I know we spent a long time talking about this one.
Yeah, this is one we talked about at length. I don't have a lot more to say other than that I think Raisel Iglesias is a good get, but we all know how risky acquiring closers can be in the offseason, so we're just gonna have to wait and see.
Yeah, the contract the Angels gave him made me feel pretty confident about that too. I think it was somewhere in the 4-year, $50-something million range. That definitely shows a commitment to him. I know the Angels are really trying to win this year. I think they're going to be in a lot of close games and a lot of opportunity for him.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the few no doubt closers, which I don't think you can say about a lot of players or a lot of relievers as teams are shifting more towards kind of mixing and matching back there. So he should definitely be a great saves option for you. But let's move on to this last trade. This is the one that broke right after Cam and I recorded our segment, but I traded you Camilo Doval for Heston Kjerstad. Why don't you start off with your thoughts behind that, Jake?
Yeah, I thought it was time to move on from Kjerstad. You know, he still has that high upside, but coming off the injury, I just haven't heard, great things. It's kind of like a wait and see approach. I don't know how high the upside is, and how soon he could get to the majors. So I was fine moving on from him to get Camilo Doval, who strikes me as more of a high variance type guy. Either he comes out next year, isn't very good, I'll drop him, that's fine. But I think there's also the potential for him to be a top 10 fantasy reliever for, even this year and then, 5-10 years down the road. So I was fine taking that risk to get a guy who seems like he figured it out in his last month in the majors with the Giants. Pitched in some pretty high leverage spots in the playoffs. So we'll see what happens. I know I heard comparisons to K-Rod from him, which if I could get K-Rod when he was a rookie, as a great get for kind of a question mark prospect who honestly was lower on my list of my prospect roster. And so if I had to drop anyone, maybe not drop, but get rid of anyone, Kjerstad was definitely at the top for me.
Yeah, I definitely think Doval is high variance. I've seen him rank pretty highly on lists. I'm not 100% sure he's going to be the closer to start next year. They still have Jake McGee there. So I think that kind of factored into my decision. And his numbers in AAA weren't that good this year. They were a lot better in the majors, interestingly, especially the walk rate. So we'll see, but I do think there's a lot of potential with him. I think with Kjerstad, I know he's supposed to be ready to start the 2022 season. He's somebody I had a late first round grade on in last year's draft. And had he been available at 12, I think there's a pretty good shot I would have taken him over Pete Crow Armstrong and Robert Hassel, mostly because of the Orioles connection, but also he was a guy that I thought was a pretty decent prospect. I think there are some questions with his swing. The power's there, but I think there's a risk that he's going to be a high strikeout guy, but he's still only 22. He's a 50 FE guy on Fangraphs going into last year. It strikes me as a potential to be a buy low. And if he doesn't pan out, I could always just cut him, and I don't feel like I gave up a ton. So this feels like a classic win-win, for the both of us as well. We kind of both got a little bit of what we wanted here. And if the trade doesn't work out for one of us, I don't think we're going to look back at this and be like, damn, I really messed up. So unless
just two huge question marks with pretty low price tags. We just each preferred the other guy. So
exactly.
As simple as that.
Yeah. These are some of my favorite trades to make, these 1-for-1 gambles. Sometimes it works in my favor, and sometimes I get Kevin Biggio instead of Brandon Lau. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. But anything you wanted to add to this, Cam?
No, that basically sums it up. They are both big question marks. I am personally banking on Camilo Doval not being the closer in San Francisco. But either way, I think Kjerstad still, there's a lot that remains to be seen about him since he didn't play this past year. And just with all the injuries, he's kind of a really, really hard guy to put a gauge on. Different prospect lists have him. Some have him in the top 80. Some have him outside the top 150. There's a lot of he's a high variance guy, so and they both are. It's going to be an interesting one to look back at 3 or 4 years later, especially if one of them breaks out and the other doesn't.
Yeah, I will say, interestingly, turning to your Red Sox, Jake, seeing how Eduardo Rodriguez was able to bounce back from the myocarditis and pitch a full year last year gave me a little more optimism about Heston Kjerstad, at least seeing that somebody was able to do that and still be successful. And, we saw the contract that Erod got this offseason. So that's just a little kind of added thought of mine. But yeah, we went over to trades here. We kind of went over, what you did earlier this offseason and kind of your philosophy. Is there anything else in store for you the rest of this offseason, Jake, or do you think you're mostly done?
I'm sure I'll still, feel out some trades. I think I have a lot of guys who could reach the majors relatively soon this next year. Part of the reason I traded Baez and Gleyber is because I have O'Neal Cruz coming up. I assume he'll start the year with the Pirates. Zips projects him to be a 3-win player already in only like 110 games or so. So I feel really good about him as a prospect. Jeremy Pena for the Astros. He could start as the opening day shortstop. And for him, it's either going to be, he comes up to the majors, he does well, I keep him, or he doesn't do well, and he's a pretty easy guy to cut. A few other guys, Stephen Kwan, Juan Yepez, maybe even Nick Pratto or Tristan Casas could come up to the majors. So I might look to move some major league guys, but as of right now, there's nothing urgent I feel like I need to do. But I'm always active, so I'm sure there'll be at least 1 or 2 more deals coming in the near future.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's kind of smart, definitely like be open to making, more moves to improve your team, but also not necessarily feeling the rush to do so. I do think you've accomplished quite a bit this offseason. And I know I feel like quite a few of these trades have really improved your team. As Cam and I have kind of talked about on previous segments. That was about it for all the questions I had. Was there anything else you wanted to ask, Cam?
No, that was it. Do we want to do the question we asked everyone last year?
Yes. Oh, I love that question.
All right, Jake. Is there one player who you haven't reached out about on any other team that you're interested in trading for?
One who I haven't reached out about. Let me think about that for a second. I feel like none that I've reached out about a few guys. I talked to Connor about Kopech for a little bit, but it didn't seem like he was too interested in trading him away. Cameron, I reached out to you about Chris Paddock, who I would still like to trade for at some point.
I would certainly be interested in trading him. I'm kind of at a point where I want to make a bigger deal to set that up, because I wouldn't want to trade Paddock if I don't already know that I have a starting pitcher around that age.
Yeah, that's very fair. Yeah, and I feel like with my starting pitchers, like obviously I have Alcantara at the top now with Luis Castillo, Carlos Rodon's kind of a question mark, Frankie Montes, but besides that, like really just a lot of question marks, whether Strasburg comes back healthy. Alex Wood, if he can be healthy this year, I think he could be a pretty good starting pitcher. Carrasco, if he can bounce back. So I'm willing to take another risk like that on Paddock. Yeah, I'm sure we'll be in talks over the offseason.
I am sure. But yeah, no, if that's all we have, then I want to thank you for coming on again. It's always a pleasure. And
thank you guys.
Yeah,
it's fun coming on.
Yeah, for sure. And with that, we will see you for the next episode.
Okay, see ya.
The mood is right, the spirit's up. We're here tonight, and that's enough. Simply having a wonderful Christmas time. Simply having a wonderful Christmas time. The party's on, feelings here that only comes.
This podcast is good.